This final chapter, Chapter 5, contains 4 quiz questions to test your understanding of the materials covered in this module. Question 1. Which of the following forms of collateral can never reduce an exposure's risk weight under Basel I? Here are the 4 permissible answers. Solution to question 1. Items A and B are explicitly listed in the tables in Chapter 2 as reducing an exposure's risk weight to 20% and 50% respectively. Item C reduces an exposure's risk weight to 0. The currency of the instrument is irrelevant when the issuer is an OECD government. Item D does not reduce the risk weight. A direct holding of OECD bank debt securities are weighted at 20%, but their use as collateral for another exposure does not provide any similar benefit. Therefore, the correct answer is D, as in David. Question 2. Bank A has a $100 portfolio of residential mortgages that meet all criteria for preferential risk weighting under Basel II's standardized approach. The bank securitizes this portfolio via a special purpose vehicle, which issues $90 of senior notes rated AAA and $5 of mezzanine notes rated BB, both to Bank B, and also $5 of first loss notes rated B, which are purchased by Bank A itself. Both banks have adopted Basel II's standardized approach. Following the purchase of the notes, the aggregate regulatory capital required against their respective investments for each of Bank A and Bank B are, and here are the 4 permissible answers. Solution to question 2. The aggregate capital requirement for Bank A is quite simply $5, since the investment is rated below BB-, so is deducted from capital in accordance with the matrix we showed in Chapter 3 for securitized exposures. For Bank B, the aggregate capital requirement is 90 times 20% times 8% for the AAA senior notes, plus 5 times 350% times 8% for the BB mezzanine notes, which comes to a total of 2.84. Therefore, the correct answer is A. Question 3. A bank's aggregate risk-weighted assets have been calculated to be $100. The bank's regulator has set the bank's minimum aggregate regulatory capital ratio at 10% to reflect risks in the bank's operations over and above an average bank. Which of the following combinations of instruments issued by the bank would most likely not satisfy the minimum capital requirements under Basel I. Here are the 4 permissible answers. Solution to question 3. The Tier 1 capital ratio and the aggregate capital ratio for each combination are set out below. 6% Tier 1, 10% aggregate for combination A, 4.5% and 10% for combination B, 7 and 10% for C, and 10% for both for combination D. At first, it would appear that each combination satisfies the regulatory requirements. However, under combination B, Tier 2 capital at 5.5% exceeds Tier 1 capital, which violates the 3rd condition discussed in Chapter 2. Therefore, the correct answer is B, as in boy. Question 4. Rank the following positions in terms of their aggregate capital requirements under Basel I from highest to lowest. A 10-year interest rate swap with HSBC with notional of $1 billion and 0 fair value at the time of calculation. A $100 million short-term documentary letter of credit opened for the account of BNP Paribas, and a $4 million unsecured loan to Alcatel. Here are the 4 permissible answers. Solution to question 4. The aggregate capital requirement for each position is shown below. For position 1, 1 billion of notional times 1.5% being the CCF for interest rate swaps with a residual maturity greater than 5 years times 20% risk weight for OECD bank times 8% equals $240,000. For position 2, $100 million face amount times 20% CCF for short-term documentary letters of credit times 20% the risk weight for an OECD bank times 8% equals $320,000. For position 3, $4 million principal times 100%, the risk weight for corporates, times 8% equals $320,000. Therefore, the correct answer is D, as in David. This completes the quiz, as well as part 2 of this module, and brings us to the end of our discussion of Basel Capital Regulation.